Welcome back to my War in East. With the Super Bowl and Valentine's Day being in such close proximity, work has basically consumed me for the last 2 weeks. But getting back into things now. His first action of combat happens along Lake Ladoga. He strikes out onto a Swampex. My units had moved closer to try to apply pressure. I do know in wintertime swamps do not count as ×3 terrain. The question up here is ultimately what his goal is. If he's just trying to hit me wherever he can just to bleed more Russian soldiers, then that's fine. If his main push is going to be to circle around my lines to potentially try to take Yaroslav in summer, then I'm probably going to have to abandon the Valdai Hills at some point. Shifting to the south, once again, this is where most of the action happened. Everywhere along the lines that he has the ability to move forward, he takes advantage of it. There's a slight amount of combat south of Stalingrad where he does take over a depot of mine. And then in the very far south, he does, with a lot of smaller units, but they're all mechanized, pushes through in a series of pincer movements where he has now isolated and surrounded 4 divisions. They're very weak divisions, so in the end, I think it's only going to be a little bit above 20,000 manpower gone there. All these moves on his part have resulted in an opening turn of mine that seems oddly similar to the last 2 weeks. I will admit this seems like a very uphill task. I do need to find somewhere that I can counterattack appropriately. My thoughts on this have always been at Stalingrad or at that line east of Grozny, whenever he does reach that, which at this pace is starting to look more like the first week of April. But the things that I can control. I'm at 4.7 million manpower on the map. It's the best I've been since, I'd have to dig back and really look at my records, but it feels like prior to the new year. Not ideal. I should have 5.5 at this point in time from what I'm gathering and talking with people. But this is the situation of this campaign. The 64,000 guns feels good. I don't know where, if it's a good pace or not, but I do feel like in the last month or two, I've addressed that. The AFV, same thing. I could have more, but I've at least been focusing on that. His has reached the map. The state of my Air Force, though, I definitely enjoy where it's at. I like having the 7200. Even looking at the production screen, the active polls of the majority of all airframes are in okay shape. Now, unfortunately, I've learned that they just cannot stand at all with the Axis Luftwaffe, so I'm not 100% sure how to use them. And I do know that, at least looking at this screen, the only ones that I can sacrifice and waste to try to get minimal gains, these tactical bombers, these biplanes, the U-2VSs and the IL-2s. I need the weather to get better, but for the current moment in time, I'm just trying to organize, get my level bombers more towards the Western Front and Stalingrad area. And then I have to really pick and choose where to use them, because if I take a bad week or two of losses with them, then I'm never going to get any of this back. So I have to make the right choice with them. So for this week, they are going to get grounded. But what I do is continue to modernize, switch some units out of the MiGs because I no longer produce them. And then I just proceed on to the ground phase. And the only other thing I do with the Air Force is switch long-range air command from Stavka and move them on over to the Central Front. I doubt this does much. I believe I could still use them for support missions on that front if I chose to, but at least for now, that's where they're going to sit. With my ground phase, I decided to end this little experiment. I'm not noticing anything happen. I don't know how I would, but I'm not seeing any change in supplies on his units visually, so I retreat the Black Sea Fleet back to its port at Batumi, where I'm most likely just going to disband it. In the north, I just retreat to my original lines. This still keeps me onto 1 hex of swamp terrain, but we are getting towards the end of winter anyways, And I mean, realistically speaking, I'm not going to lose this campaign up here. That's going to happen either at Moscow or Saratov. My struggle with Manpower is the fact that I only get about 95,000 a week. So as he does his combats, he's pretty much insured to kill 60,000, especially this week with the units that are isolated in the south, because he does still have the ability to break through and cut me off. So at this point in time, I need to buy space or continue to use the Russian terrain, and unfortunately, that means here at Tambov, I'm falling back. I do recognize the issue with defensive positioning. I'll probably do a delaying action at that rail line before ultimately seceding it and heading further east. There's a little bit of hills, and eventually I'll see the rivers. Stalingrad is a duplicate of the same process I've been doing the last few turns. Falling back, obviously. But I was able to get a new guards rifle unit down into this area in pretty decent shape. I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do with that, because I would like to find a way to do some counterattacks. Unfortunately, I'm just not in a position to do any of that right now. Staring at the city itself, I had hopes that these forts would be dug in a little further by the time his troops reached them, specifically the ones in the Stalingrad hexes themselves. I believe I'll be at level 4 forts in the 1 at the beginning of my turn. I wanted to be obviously at 5, but hopefully I can make the combat in this region somewhat interesting and at least last a little longer than just one turn. In the Deep South, though, these units are, for all intents and purposes, cut off completely, and I will not be getting them back. I'm just going to continue to retreat, and at this point in time, it's decided that it's going to be to the city of Grozny itself. I've decided also to not move those units in the mountains and hills out at this point in time. I'm going to let him do his thing, hopefully mopping up those 3 divisions that he has cut off and isolated. I thought it was 4. But hopefully at that point in time, that delays him a little bit, and then we can get into April, where I'll ultimately disband all those forts, and there's a chance here that I can do something. I'm figuring that he's going to bring down probably a little bit of panzers, because he does at least see that I'm here. So this is probably not the exact operation that he's going to bring to me when he tries to break through and move down the Caspian Sea. But at this point in time, that's the update to my campaign. I'm curious to see what I'll be facing when I switch over to turn 41. And at least for the time being, this is where I stand.